Assassins are everywhere in pop culture. They're in movies, video games, books, you name it. We've been sold this image of the slick, suited killer who slips in and out of chaos like a ghost, leaving a trail of perfectly timed explosions and morally justified corpses behind them. Think Jason Bourne snapping necks with encyclopedias or John Wick turning a pencil into a weapon of mass destruction. These fictional assassins are elegant, efficient, and, let's face it, kinda cool. But real assassins? The ones from history? Well, they weren't exactly sipping espressos while practicing Krav Maga on rooftops in Rome. In fact, the true origin of the assassin is far stranger and much darker than anything Hollywood could come up with. Because once upon a time, nestled in the mountains of Persia, there existed a secretive sect of killers whose influence reached from the deserts of the Middle East to the very heart of European legend. Their methods were brutal. Their motives were rooted in survival and ideology. And their name, whether through myth, fear, or misunderstanding, became the very word we now use for murderer for hire. This is the real story of the Order of Assassins. Before they were killers, they were believers. Our story begins not with blood, but with a schism, a religious rupture in the powerful Fatimid Caliphate around the 11th century. The Caliphate, which was a Shia Muslim dynasty based in Egypt, had reached a point of crisis over who would inherit its leadership. When the ruling caliph passed over his older son Nizar in favor of his younger brother, things quickly escalated. Nizar was executed, and his followers scattered, but they didn't vanish. Led by a passionate and fiercely intelligent man named Hashashins, a group of these exiles fled to Persia, where they laid the foundation for what would become Nizari Ismailism, a splinter branch of Shia Islam that viewed Nizar as the rightful imam. But Hassan wasn't just a theologian. He was a strategist, a visionary, and above all, he understood the art of survival in a world dominated by powerful empires who saw his people as dangerous heretics. Persia at the time was under the thumb of the Seljuks, a formidable Sunni Muslim dynasty that viewed the Nizaris as both religious deviants and political threats. And so, while the Nizaris preached their message in secret, they were hunted openly. But Hassan didn't fight back with armies. He fought with something else, something far more enduring, a plan. High in the Alborz mountains of northern Persia sat a seemingly impenetrable fortress called Alamut. Clinging to a steep cliff, it overlooked the surrounding valleys like a hawk watching its prey. This was not a place you could storm with ease. With its single winding path and natural defenses, it was a fortress built for ghosts. And it was here that Hassan decided to make his stand. But there was one problem: Alamut already belonged to the Seljuks. So how did Hassan take it? Not with swords, but with whispers. Over the course of 2 years, Hassan and his followers infiltrated the area. They converted local villagers, placed allies inside the castle, and slowly undermined its command from within. When Hassan finally revealed his true identity and seized control, it was with such cunning that not a single drop of blood was shed. In fact, legend has it that he even paid the Seljuk lord a hefty sum as compensation. Whether that's true or just good PR, we'll never know, but what we do know is that Hassan had established the perfect base for his movement. Hidden, defensible, and symbolically powerful. From Alamut, the Nizaris could spread their beliefs, plan their missions, and defend themselves from any who dared to challenge them. But they didn't just defend, they struck back. Facing annihilation by much larger empires, Hassan pioneered a form of warfare that would redefine asymmetry itself. He trained a group of elite operatives known as the Fida men, utterly loyal to the cause, willing to sacrifice their lives for the greater mission. These were not soldiers. They were infiltrators, spies, killers. Their job was simple: eliminate high-value targets. Politicians, generals, rival imams, anyone who posed a threat to the Nizari state. But it wasn't just the kill that mattered, it was how the kill was done. Public assassinations were a specialty. A Fida would often disguise himself as a beggar or a servant, spending weeks or even months getting close to his target. Then, when the moment was right, he would strike, usually with a dagger, in full view of the public. The goal was not just to kill, but to send a message. No one was untouchable, not even behind a wall of guards or inside a palace. One moment of inattention and the blade would find its mark. These assassinations created a ripple effect of fear. Leaders began sleeping in chainmail. Some never traveled without dozens of guards. But it rarely helped. If the Order of Assassins decided your time was up, your time was up. One of the most tantalizing and controversial legends about the Assassins involves a walled garden, drugs, and a very creative recruitment process. According to Marco Polo and a few other medieval travelers, Hassan the Sabah would drug new recruits with hashish, lead them into a lavish garden filled with wine, music, and women, and then convince them that they had briefly entered paradise. The catch? The only way to return to that heavenly realm was to die in service of the Imam. It's a brilliant bit of psychological manipulation if it's true. The problem is there's very little solid evidence that any of this actually happened. The term Hashashin, from which we get the word assassin, likely comes from this legend, but it was mostly used by the group's enemies to discredit them. Whether the Nizaris really used drugs to brainwash followers, or whether it was all just a smear campaign, we may never know. But it worked. The image of the mindless, drugged-up killer sent on suicidal missions by a shadowy leader was enough to terrify medieval rulers into paranoia. And the word stuck. The Nizaris weren't just fighting the Seljuks. They had enemies everywhere. The Sunni Abbasid Caliphate, the rival Shia Fatimids, Christian crusaders who couldn't tell one Muslim sect from another. Even Saladin, the famous Muslim general and Sultan of Egypt and Syria, once tried to wipe them out. In 1176, he laid siege to one of their strongholds. But one night, as he slept in his tent, he awoke to find a dagger placed beside his pillow, along with a threatening note. No guards saw anyone enter. The message was clear: attack us, and we'll make it personal. The next day, Saladin lifted the siege. The Order of Assassins had achieved what entire armies could not, with one knife and one unspoken promise. And sometimes the assassins played politics. There are records of them cooperating with crusaders when it suited their goals. The enemy of my enemy, and all that. The Order wasn't just a band of killers, it was a complex network of spies, diplomats, and religious leaders who knew how to manipulate geopolitics as skillfully as they wielded blades. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Order was the sheer devotion of its members. Fidei operatives would leap from rooftops to their deaths if ordered to. There are stories of public displays where Hassan I Sabah would test his followers' loyalty by commanding them to die on the spot, jumping from towers, stabbing themselves, or walking into certain death. These may sound like myths, but even if exaggerated, they point to an unshakable internal structure built on total obedience. The assassins were not mercenaries. They were true believers. Their loyalty wasn't bought. It was forged through ideology, community, and sometimes fear. But no amount of strategy or secrecy could prepare the Order for what came next. In the mid-13th century, a new threat appeared on the horizon, one that didn't negotiate, didn't scare easily, and didn't leave survivors. The Mongols. Under Hulagu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, the Mongol horde tore through the Middle East like a wildfire. They weren't intimidated by daggers under pillows or whispered threats. They crushed city after city, and the assassins were next. Alamut, the mighty fortress that had stood for generations, fell in 1256 after a brutal siege. One by one, the other castles of the Nizaris surrendered or were destroyed. The Order of Assassins, as a political and military power, was wiped out in a matter of years. Some survivors fled. Some assimilated. But the age of the mountain fortress was over. And yet, they never really disappeared. The modern Nizari Ismailis, descendants of Hassani Sabah's followers, still exist today. Around 15 million strong, they are peaceful, thriving, and spread across more than 25 countries. Their focus is education, charity, and cultural preservation, not political assassination. But the legend of the Order remains, because what they created was something rare and terrifying. A system where fear became power, where belief was a weapon, and where the invisible hand of a small group could sway the fate of empires. Their story echoes in every spy thriller, every tale of secret societies, and every conspiracy theory about groups who pull strings from the shadows. Assassin's Creed, the blockbuster video game franchise, borrowed heavily from their lore. And every time we use the word assassin, we're paying tribute, intentionally or not, to that long-vanished mountain kingdom where ideas were sharper than swords and where silence often meant death. In the end, what makes the story of the assassins so compelling isn't just the blood or the betrayal. It's the way they turned power on its head. They didn't need armies or wealth to make the world tremble. All they needed was belief and a dagger. They understood something that even today's leaders often forget, that fear, when wielded with precision, can be more effective than any army, and that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one shouting at your gates, but the one quietly watching from the crowd, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.